I see that we have committee members, Al Almeida, Teresa Bizade, Michelle Coelho, myself, and our ex officio member, Gladys Cooper. So we are ready to start this meeting, and I just want to thank the board members who also made time in their schedules to join us this evening, as well as
Is Juanita here?
our administrators. I do not see her on this call.
Okay.
That looks like Dr. Casimiro maybe. Yep.
Hi, sorry, I'm trying to get home. It was a lot
That's
of
okay.
traffic.
We just got started, so your
Okay.
timing was perfect.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to head and kick the meeting off. The first item on our agenda is a current policy that's for review, and it is a required policy. It's for food service charging. And as you all know, we do offer free meals for students now. So Kelly, if you want to dive into why we're reviewing this policy and what we're doing.
Sure. So I did ask Barry to come. Really what we needed to do is update this policy to bring it in alignment with our CEP or direct certified, so our reduced lunch for all students. Now as a direct certified district, there were additional requirements that needed to be added in. It has been a little bit of time since this policy was last updated. So Barry, if I could ask you to just walk the board through the highlights of the changes to this policy, we would appreciate it. Barry, we can't hear you. Know if he's having trouble hearing me. What I will do then, I will walk through it, and then if there are questions, hopefully Barry can chime in as we go through this. You will see in the beginning section, it outlines the Community Eligibility Program, or CEP, which is part of the direct certified. It spells out what that provision is, and the fact that all students are entitled to one meal that is free of charge during that time period. We are not allowed to charge students that are attending in our district as a CEP district. It also outlines that there are federal funds used to subsidize these meals for children. We took out the references, so you'll see here anything in red was added as additions to this policy. Anything with the strike through was in our former policy and is no longer applicable. So you'll see all the charging parameters that were in there previously were removed. It defines who our district students are, and then goes on further to talk about, it removes any of the delinquent bad debt credit, those types of things from there, because that is not a requirement any longer. It also has a provision for dissemination of the policy, which remains the same. And then updated legal references at the bottom. So it is bringing our policy in alignment with the practices that have been going on in our district for the last few years. And that is why we brought it forward tonight, even though it wasn't in the projected series that we were working on.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.
Any questions? Teresa?
So lunches are free for everybody.
That is correct.
Thank you. I mean, I should say students, not adults.
That is correct. Yes. Thank you for clarifying. I assumed you meant students, but yes, this policy applies to students.
Yeah, I was thinking, I said, I better be correct.
Any other questions?
I don't see a problem.
All right. I don't see any questions from committee members. I'll open this up for questions from non-committee members, if there are any.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry that I'm late.
Hi, Julie. Thank you for coming on. We just got started, and we're going over the first policy on the agenda. It's a revision to the policy for charging for meals. We provide them for free now for students in the district. And so we're just revising the existing policy to make sure we stay in alignment with our practices.
Kate, I have a question.
Go ahead, Rich.
Does this policy cover just a specific meal, or does it cover breakfast and lunch? And are all schools, all students eligible in every one of our schools for this to be supported?
Great question. So you will see here the eligibility provision, I just highlighted it. District-wide participations, that's all of our students, to provide a free breakfast and free lunch within the district. And then for any students in our after-school programs, it's one free after-school snack. So those are the allotments or what is allowed under this policy. So it is all students. It applies to breakfast and lunch. And then for those that are attending after-school programs, it allows for a snack as well.
Teresa, did you have another question?
Yeah, does the cost of this program, does that come under our budget, or is this totally like a grant? Something different, I mean, separate, or is it under our budget?
You mean the payment of the meals?
Correct.
Kelly, I'm back.
Thank you, Barry. I'll let you answer
Yeah.
that.
So it all comes out, filters out of the USDA and then filters down through the state of Connecticut. So we claim meals, complete meals for breakfast and lunch for students, and we get reimbursed as
So
a
this is
district.
totally different. This is not part of the budget then?
No,
Our
absolutely
budget,
not.
school budget.
No, this comes out of the school lunch program, as do everything that school lunch involves.
Oh, I guess we lost them.
No, he's here.
Yep.
But he just confirmed that everything comes out of the school lunch program. I believe it's the federal level? Or is it the state level?
Well, it's all USDA originally, and then it filters down through the Connecticut state.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
Julie, you have a question?
Yes, and I'm sorry if you guys answered this. Would that cover also the school meals during the summer program?
The summer program is not part of the CEP program, but we do apply for the school summer food service program. So during the summer, breakfast and lunch is also free, but it's a different set of standards and program.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Michelle, go ahead.
Hold on. Sorry. How many meals then, breakfast, lunch, and after school are served daily? Like how many lunches, breakfast, and after school meals
So
are
I
we
don't-
serving?
I don't mind if we answer this question right now, but I just want to make sure that as we go forward, the questions we're asking are pertaining to the policy work that we're doing. I just don't want to keep anybody here longer than they have to be here for the meeting, okay? So
Yes. You know what,
Priya,
Kate? I held
provide
back.
that.
Yeah. Thanks. I did hold
Yeah,
back. Sure.
I
which
can answer it. I can answer it very quickly. We do roughly 4,000 breakfasts district wide, and about 8,000 lunches, and approximately 250 after school snack program
Thank you.
meals.
Thanks, Barry.
Bless.
Thanks.
Any other questions about the policy here? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to make a recommendation for first read to the board.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, second by Michelle. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion so carries. Thank you, everybody. All right, we're gonna move down the agenda, and I'm gonna do the same thing I did last time, which is to lead the conversation on this. This is about policy 4140.2 / 4240.2, and this is the policy for compensation related to central office exempt staff, non-bargaining unit employees. We had a little bit of a challenge last time, finding some consensus on this particular policy. I did ask that committee members send me any suggested language they wanted to use in writing. I have not received any suggestions at this point. I did receive an email from Juanita with some information about other districts. And, you know, she was not able to find a lot of instances where this policy was being employed. And one of the reasons for that is that this policy is not a required policy. So I wanted to give Dr. Casimiro just a few moments. Thank you, Barry. Appreciate you being here. I wanted to give Dr. Casimiro just a few moments to speak about this and talk about specifically, you know, the importance of her being able to make an assessment and about how the allotment of money is used. Dr. Casimiro?
Sorry, just getting reoriented to my desktop here. So thanks, Kate. I appreciate it. You know, you're right. There's this the necessity of the policy varies in how districts have implemented it. You know, whether or not they have a separate carved out policy or not, is, you know, kind of locally determined. You know, there are many school districts, if you will, that do make reference to the idea that the superintendent, you know, has the responsibility to carry, you know, the determination for exempt staff when it comes to salaries and wages to ensure competitiveness and retention. And that's sort of the pervasive theme. So if you look, you know, I pulled like Madison, Waterbury, Greenwich, Meriden, West Hartford, Norwalk, New Britain, Region 14, Cheshire, Stafford, Putnam, Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, Wilton. I can go on, Bethel, you know, all of our surrounding towns that within somewhere within either the administrative policies or within something specifically carved out around exempt salaries, over and over again, it references that the superintendent has responsibility for exempt staff salaries to ensure flexibility in managing district operations and talent retention. And this phrase is reiterated very similarly across multiple different types of policies related to this, that refers back to the statute around this idea. And so while you don't necessarily have to have a specific thing carved out, people do that to reference, it seems, the understanding about the remaining competitive and being able to be responsive to the needs of the school district and the operations. And so that's really all that this is. It's been a long-standing policy, one designed, again, to ensure operational effectiveness and efficiency. And, you know, it's something that, you know, I think that perhaps maybe misunderstood as to, you know, maybe as to the purpose of it. It's certainly not something that should be abused in any way. And if that, you know, if there's any concern about that, that perhaps maybe where the genesis of some of the language, you know, wanting to change some of the language. But it's, again, one of the only groups in the district where there is no set salary, there is no set wage, incremental increase, there are no steps. And they are typically unique jobs, generally, and that with the understanding that to stay market and economy ready and to remain competitive, that the compensation, you know, needs to be able to be flexed when appropriate. I know there was some concern around, you know, I think in the last meeting, there was a concern around that everybody in the group had the same type of a number of a percentage increase. And I want to address that a little bit if I can, in the sense that we had, if you look at all of our other contracts, generally across, you know, teachers, actually always across teachers and the secretary group and the IT and administration, custodians, that those wage increases are the same. So when those go up, it's 3%, 4%, whatever, you know, 4.5%, whatever the percentage is. All teachers, all secretaries, all IT, all custodians, all administrators get the same wage increase across the board. The exempt staff allows us we generally have the same percentage across groups and bodies and types. That's pretty typical because it's typical with our other groups as well. But the idea that in some instances we have an opportunity to make an adjustment. So if someone gets hired in May or June, then they're not maybe benefit by the increased percentage roll up on July 1st, right? If that makes sense. Additionally, there could be a performance issue that needs to be addressed or that is being addressed, and that might be flexed accordingly. And then similarly, you can have a situation where there could be a couple of positions, a class of positions. Perhaps it's something that requires technical knowledge or is in a shortage area, and to remain more competitive. I'm sorry, my dog's making a lot of noise in the background. She hasn't done that since the pandemic. In order to do that, to remain competitive, you have to make a one-time adjustment. So maybe, there might be 2 or 3 positions in a group that need to be moved to remain competitive, because we're finding that we're losing folks in a particular area. So, there's a wide variety of reasons why this exists. And I personally think the reason it exists and as a separate carve out is because of that the importance of the ability to attract and retain competent employees. That is the purpose of it. Again, certainly there's no benefit to overcompensating someone unjustly. Those things come right back to bite you in the when other groups get hold of numbers and they see things and they compare themselves within same groups. And certainly there has to be just cause, and there has to be kind of a rationale, and there's always an opportunity for the superintendent to have that conversation with the board, so that they understand the reasons for why certain groups may receive something or the other. But generally, like I said, it's not that common to take a percentage and rank it all different numbers across. It's based on an annual increase, whether that be in consideration with other union groups, cost of living, and then to remain, numbers to remain competitive and to retain our workforce.
Thanks, Dr. Casimiro. A couple questions for you, but I'll hold mine until other committee members have an opportunity to ask questions. Teresa?
How many have quit from this category this year? Just curious.
How many have quit?
Yeah.
So I don't want to be disrespectful here. I just want to make sure that we're staying within the bounds of the conversation about the policy itself.
Well, I want to see how relevant it is, her explanation of retaining people. Like, have we lost anybody from this category?
Yeah, we have turnover all the time. But because we have
this
been able,
year.
I could go back and look at the list. We lost our grants person. Yes.
Dr. Kessler, if I could add, I will speak just directly from my perspective. You have 4 BCBAs in the district. We lost what? So 25%, of the unit. We have approximately 7 or 8, depending on one is part-time occupational therapists. We lost 1 out of that group. So there is some turnover. Those are just 2 quick examples I could give you. I don't have the exact number.
No,
but
I appreciate that. I just wanted to get a sense of that category and what you're experiencing. Thank you. That's all I needed.
Sure.
Other questions from committee members? I'm going to ask a couple questions then if I don't see any other committee members.
Louisa has her hand up.
She's not on the committee.
Not on the committee, so go ahead, Kate.
The first question is, who comprises the category of non-exempt employees? Or sorry, exempt employees?
So you have
the central office exempt staff.
Mostly central office exempt staff. So you've got I wish I had the list. I should pull it up somewhere. Kelly, do you happen to have it handy?
I can tell you, it's your occupational therapists, your physical therapists, your BCBAs, your interpreter translators, a handful of some folks that work in kind of alternative programs. It's your core cabinet and your extended cabinet. So it's generally those people who are not in unions for one variety of reasons or another. And it's about 40, I think right now it's about 45 people.
45.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
BCBAs, could you just
Sure.
Explain what those are, please?
Sure. They're the specific title is Board Certified Behavior Analyst. They are traditionally working with students with special education needs, providing behavioral intervention support. So when we have a student, you've heard frequently about students that are having difficulty regulating themselves in the school environment. They are the folks that go in, conduct observations, provide staff training, and implement individualized plans for students with those needs.
Thank you very much. And I do have a second question. I just want to make sure if there are any committee members that have a follow-up question or any other questions, they get a chance here. So my second question is, Dr. Casimir, you made mention of something that these are statutory obligations or statutory, that's not the right word, statutory authority that you were given, which means that this is codified in state law already, correct? So
that generally that the superintendent is the person who is determining wages and compensation. You know, that happens also obviously in conjunction with the board with a budget process, right? So superintendent has to stay within the bounds of a budget. And that's where, so, you know, when generally across the year, you know, that we're negotiating different contracts. And you can see where things are falling. We've got board members that sit on those committees as well. You get a very thorough analysis of prevailing wages, local wages. You get a sense of what you know, what other systems are doing, what the school system ourselves, what we as a city can tolerate, and we have those conversations. And so, you know, there's a general percentage that comes out of that. And when we go around budget time, you know, the idea that those percentages are taken into consideration. We don't go at budget time and go, well, we're going to give, when the secretary contract comes up, we're going to give them this, and we're going to give the DSAA this number, and we're going to give the exempt that number. That's not how it plays out. But we generally have a number in mind of that covers that level of negotiation and for all groups. And that is a number that is determined in an allocation. So once we determine that our salaries per se are X amount, and at 4% is our roll up, and we're across the board, whether it be in consideration of contracts that we already exist or contracts we anticipate to negotiate, you have a general number that we work with. And once we kind of lock in our numbers, past budget, et cetera, we you know, we have an allocation. So it's my responsibility to stay within the confines of the budget, right? That's our allocation. And you know, if I were to go into the red because I'm going to give, you know, Kelly Truchas a $60,000 raise, certainly I'll be held accountable for something like that, right? I cannot go into the red. I cannot go beyond so I have to stay within the boundaries of an allocation that gets determined. And so I have some flexibility as the purview of my superintendency to flex what that is in a fair and just way, of course. And then the board can absolutely have, you know, those are conversations that we can have in response to that. And you know, and taking in information that, you know, through the board that you would like to convey to me as well.
Thank you, Dr. Casimir. Louisa, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you, Kate. I absolutely agree that, you know, it's not our position to determine the who should be getting what increase. My particular concern with the process was having it given to us, you know, last minute in June at our last board meeting. Is there a way to get that, whether it's written in the policy or however, budget cycle? So when we're voting on it, we know what we're voting on. We know the increases, what the unions are getting, what the non-unions are getting, just so we have a much more clearer, transparent picture before we cast our votes.
Sure, that was a good question, Louisa, and it's something that came up at the last policy meeting. We did discuss in looking at this policy that the date that's listed in the policy says explicitly that by July 1st, the Board of Education shall approve an allocation for salary and benefits adjustments, and that the superintendent shall report annually concerning the implementation of the policy. So one of the suggestions that came forward was to adjust that date to be in alignment with our budget process so that we would have awareness of what the superintendent would be doing with the allotment prior to voting on the budget. That
Yeah.
would also move it up in terms of, you know, integrating it as part of the superintendent evaluation process.
Mhm.
If I might make one suggestion for you, Kate, that it says by July, meaning no later than July 1. And the reason why that date is there is because that's the first day of your new fiscal
Fiscal
year.
year. Mhm.
So I agree about moving it up much earlier. We've talked about that often. But I think that within the current language, or if you want to change by to no later than, it will still allow you to kind of set, you know, the date can kind of float, but you can set it every year as part of your budget calendar. I think we've put the budget calendar out for this coming up year, haven't we? Kara or Mike, that you can just embed it right into the budget calendar and still be in compliance as long as it's not later than July 1st.
Yeah, see, that's totally possible. I think part of the reason for the timing of it is it also that, you know, at the end of the year, after you have assessed your employees and you're thinking about you're heading into your next year, you kind of know where you stand, who's coming back, who's not, what you have to work with. And so the timing of it kind of lines up with the evaluation process of staff and, you know, everyone meeting their goals. You know, it's a little bit different with the other groups because no matter the performance of a teacher, the performance of an administrator, the performance of a custodian, they're going to get their contractual raises regardless. Whereas the exempt staff, it's based on, you know, performance and they are at will employees. So if we don't like something, we can, you know, make changes to that.
Michelle, you have a question?
Yes, just if I'm listening about changing the timing possibly, or at least having it come up. So when we are talking finances and the budget, I like the idea of that. But if we're talking about some of these positions being specific, you know, would we have a breakdown of each job, just not each one, but let's say there's 5 or 6 different categories. Would you break that out so we could say, you know, maybe it's a cabinet member, that's going to be different than a behavioral therapist, right? Or whatever. Would that be part, or could we include that as part of the process to make sure that's included when we review the numbers?
Yeah, well, that happens all generally at the same. So the exempt staff wages get determined at the same time. So whether there are cabinet members, extended cabinet members,
Yeah.
or
Okay.
they're a BCBA, that's a whole group together. And yes, and you know, it's also helpful too. I know one of the board's goals is to better understand the roles of cabinet. You know, so you know, taking some time too to understand, you know, what is a BCBA. And you know, what do they do in our school system, and understanding some of their technical qualifications also is very helpful too, because I think you would feel some of the same sense of urgency around some of the positions that I do as well. So
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? Any questions from non-committee members?
Kate, I have a question. I just
Go
like
ahead, Rick.
I'd just like to echo the comments made that I think we should include some wording in here which indicates that the details be provided in the timetable with the budget calendar. I think in the past, some of the conversations have been looking at this was after we presented the budget. So we can make this part of the budget process. I think it sort of cleans things up and puts everything in perspective with regard to, you know, financial numbers.
Thank you for the feedback. Dr. Casimiro?
yeah, Kate, I think I like the idea, and I think that, you know, what we would do is you would take all of your contractual obligations and your policies, right? Not your policies, your contracts, right? To see what will the teacher contract bear out? What will the administrative contract bear out? And you know, to put them all together in a group is, I think, you know, probably helpful to see the broader picture.
Teresa? You're muted, Teresa. Sorry.
Sorry. Did you ever, you said, did you ever think of putting this, like you did the book for the student advisors, did you ever think of categorizing and organizing the non-bargaining employees into categories and how they were reviewed, and institute any caps after so many dozens of years? I mean, or is this something that has never been thought of?
can you just clarify what you mean by the student advisors? What that?
You did that nice new handbook about for the student advisors for the money. Did you ever think of doing a
Oh,
handbook
right. I understand what you're saying. Okay.
on these type of employees? It seems to be kind of sole discretion of the superintendent and not anything in concrete framework type of thing.
So I just want to clarify, Dr. Kesmer, and then feel free to jump in, but
Sure.
By law, by statute at the state level, it is the superintendent's discretion and responsibility to allot those dollars in the way that the superintendent feels is appropriate. And that's why I referenced before that the part of the helpfulness of seeing this in advance of the budget cycle is also being able to integrate it as part of the performance review, the evaluation for the superintendent, right? But that is the responsibility and the authority of the superintendent's position for those decisions. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Dr. Kesmer.
Yeah, thank you, Kate, for clarifying that. And that is the whole, that is the entire intent of both the statute and as this. Now, there is a cap, Teresa, there is a cap on superintendents at some point with relative to TRB and what districts can pay. But there is not necessarily a cap. And you don't, it's not very common. Now, not to say that, a district can't go beyond its means. And so there, internally you're relegated to a particular salary range. But not necessarily. We have never done a cap. You don't see too many caps in relative to this policy. This policy actually, is about the flexibility as opposed to creating a fixed number. So thank you.
Are there any questions and any other questions about this policy? Committee or non-committee members? So in moving forward with this, I would like to hear from committee members, please, about how they feel about either adjusting the language in here to reflect a different timeline so that we can ensure that we're seeing this information before the budget cycle happens, or whether or not they want to keep this particular policy since it is not required. Teresa?
I like what Kim suggested.
So adjusting both the policy and then also ensuring that it shows up on the budget calendar.
Yeah.
Okay. Other committee members?
If we're gonna change the date, maybe we should back it up on like 90 days from July 1st.
So Al, I think that the thought process here is that we want to make sure we're looking at the superintendent's allotment prior to approving the full budget for the year. We typically see that information in January, and then we vote in February because it has to go over to the mayor's office. So 90 days, I don't know that would satisfy our budget cycle.
Okay. So maybe we put it at January 1st. Or January 2nd, whatever we want.
Okay, that's a consideration. Committee members? Other committee members?
Yes, I have a quick question. Will the language reflect on, I know it says on the policy has been
I don't want to,
adopted on.
Julie, I apologize. I need to hear from committee members first, okay?
Oh.
And that's just because when we're running the meetings, if I allow other board members to participate and we have too many of them, it does turn into an official Board of Ed meeting, which we haven't noticed. So for legal reasons, I just need to stick with committee members first. I'll be happy to come back around to you at the end, okay?
Yeah, my apologies.
Not a problem. Thank you so much. Michelle, I see your hand up.
Yep. Hi, Kate.
So if we were to look at that January 1st date, and we are so tight on trying to figure out the numbers, we, I think, have to hand it in like February 7th, or it was like in February, right?
The 15th, it has to go over to the
Right.
mayor's
I
office, I
think,
believe.
yeah, I think in our mind, our last meeting was somewhere around the 7th, right before that, week before. I don't know if that, when we sit down and get together and start to really work on this, usually we start now at the beginning of the year, you know what I mean? To try to make those numbers. So, I would like it to line up with our budget. I think that's really important because if we are not even considering it at that point, it kind of comes back later. So I like the idea of trying to line it up if we can figure out where that sweet spot is. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Dr. Casimiro, just want to get your feedback on the two suggestions so far. One being January 1st and the other being, as we start the budget process.
Yeah,
Making that something that we look at.
Oh, sure. I think, as we try to start the budget process relatively early, I think about kind of how the last process now, last year was a unique year, but also, your first projection, if you will, is really a projection, right? And that the information gets more clarified as the year progresses, right? You're looking at your health insurance claims coming in. You're looking at contracts that you're negotiating, and where those are landing. You're looking at, how the cost of fuel is going up or down. And so, where you start your ideas sometime in October and, early November, could look a little different by the time you get to when we have to send this off to the city.
Right.
And even from that point, things change from February to June, right? In terms of climate, economy, you name it, all kinds of stuff. So, recognizing that when a board puts their budget together, it's their best projection at that moment in time. And that, so when we do this in the, whether we start these conversations earlier, sooner than later, which I think is good, and healthy discussion, you're still coming up with, your best projection, at the beginning of the year. And I would like to leave the room, leave some room for, when we submit it in February, to be able to say, okay, this is what this was our best snapshot by the time we reached when we had to submit this. So, there could be some room between October and February where we're discussing and revisiting. And I think that that's okay. Because it won't just be this that we're discussing. It will be other things that we need to consider in the budget as well. So, I kind of see it as a little bit of an iterative process until we lock it in.
Okay, and when you talk about it being an iterative process, do you mean between the board and the superintendent
Yeah, so
specifically?
so the development of the budget. So, Mike will come out and present this is where we're at. Here are the priorities, here are the district goals. And, if we come out with one number, I think about some of the things that we had to add in that weren't considered, and I just want to, as we develop our budget, and it's particularly in the challenging year that we're going to have, I think it's going to be, we're going to be going through some fluctuations as we're crafting that budget. And, I think I welcome a healthy discussion on the budget. We have a lot to analyze this year in light of a variety of scenarios that could play out. And so, this is just one component. This is actually a small component of the larger budget discussions that we'll have. So, yeah, I think we come up with a timeline, and maybe we start in finance and get that ball rolling with contract reviews, and then bring that to the board, and however the board sees fit with discussing it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Michelle, did you still have do you have a hand up for another question, or is it just from before?
I think it's from before. I mean, obviously, as the conversations continue, when Kara's responding, I'm going to just say one thing. That is one of my concerns, because I'm not really sure how we're setting up. We're going to have so many with the career and the pathways, and what we've experienced with even cabinet members that were not included in the other package. That flexibility is so needed, but at the same time, that oversight is always so important. So if we can strike that balance so that we include everyone during the process, it's always a shot in the dark, because come May, when it comes down from generals, that's really when we know what's happening. It's already
Right.
too late.
So, obviously using our best guess of, what is the highest, is it, when do we take out the insurance? Is it the beginning of the year? When do, all that information is clear. It's just for me, I know that we're going to have to be really creative on how we're going to be striking up those partnerships. And, I'm excited about that. But at the same time, I've got some concern on how does that, line up in the finances and make sure that we do have that oversight. But I can see the need, especially in specific carved out areas, firsthand right here in our cabinet. So thank you.
Any other comments from committee members, please? Okay, Julie, seeing none, I'm going to ask it for whatever you'd like to share, please.
I completely forgot my question now. So
I'm so sorry.
My apologies.
That's okay. I'm sorry that we didn't get there in time. But...
It's okay.
Gladys, did you have something to add?
Just a comment, and I'm listening to everybody, and I think everyone has made really good comments. But we also have to realize too that we can say that we're going to have $1 million, and then something pops up, and then we take the authority away from someone, and then we're struggling again. So I think my suggestion is, if this is not a required policy, and we're a new group going into this, all the challenges that we went through last year, and it's a learning curve for everyone. So I would see if we could see somehow, and we can't determine if we should say to the superintendent, we allow you $5 million from a recommendation from the finance committee. And she will have that amount of money to work with for the exempt employees and the non-exempt employees. Then tying her hand to say, no, we're going to give you a specific date. We know what time, how the budget is scheduled to go to the mayor, and all the other stuff that goes along with it. I would be comfortable if we could come up, if the group will come up, if it's your desire to say, we allot this a certain amount to the superintendent, and she decides who gets that allotment, and what our negotiations, and many of you have sit on these various teams, and we know what the rationale is. And a lot of time we don't have the time to come back and say, and I think it's somewhere that we have to have these contracts. And I think Kim said earlier, July, people are leaving the district. We have to let them know whether they're going to be returning. So, take all that in consideration. The only thing that I would like to say is that to propose a date amount, if possible, that the superintendent can work with. I don't even know if we can do that now at this time. So that's my only comment.
Okay, thank you, Gladys. Michelle.
Oh my God, sorry, my hand's still up.
Julie? Perhaps that's from before as well. Dr. Casimiro.
Yeah, so go ahead. I can't remember what I was going to ask.
So I just wanted to, to state that, the policy reads July 1st, right? So by July 1st, the board shall approve. So, it doesn't, you can approve it on January, you can approve it in February, you could approve it in March, April, May. The policy allows you the breadth that you need to do the work that needs to be done. And it's not to say that what gets fixed in February, if we have to make some changes, or if the situation, the plan changes, situation changes, that we have to revisit, that there's the ability to do that as well, not to be locked into a particular date that, beyond, but the deadline is by July 1st. So I think as long as we add it into the planning of, as in our discussion, and again, I think that it happens naturally or organically, if you will, when those initial numbers come out. I just don't think we talk about it. right? So I
Right.
think that that's where like kind of the surprise came in around, you know, when we landed in June, was that the allocation had already been
Right.
determined. And I think there were some hard feelings with like, wait, I feel like I didn't know what that was or what that means. But to when the budget gets crafted, those contracts are in fact taken into consideration
Mhm.
in the percentage for the roll up in the ask. But we just don't ever really go back and review it. We have people sit in on those contract negotiations, but we don't go back and specifically review. And this is what the administrators are getting next. They're getting the next year, and the, you know, by
Mhm.
contract. And so it really, you know, should be part of a discussion when the budget is being developed, and just sort of put out in the open with the group so that we know where we're at.
So in terms of this policy, then, what I'm trying to get a sense of is what the appetite is for the committee. To my mind, you know, this is sort of a formality to have this policy in place for our better education and understanding of, you know, what the superintendent is authorized to do by the state, and what the superintendent is required to do by the state. So, you know, I don't know that I have a strong opinion about maintaining this policy if folks feel like it doesn't serve the purpose that they want it to serve. Um, you know, but I'm certainly open to, you know, a conversation about that. And that's what I'm trying to get a sense from folks, whether or not they want to maintain this policy, and if they do, what, if any, changes they would like to see reflected. So if just for the purpose of this conversation, I'm just going to ask each member, each committee member who's on here right now to just sort of voice their opinion on that, please.
I would say just keep it as it is.
Me too.
Okay. Michelle?
I mean, I'm okay to go with the group. If we find that it stimulates, like you're saying, Kate, more of a conversation at the budget, then I'm all for that, because you know, we're more seasoned, 4 years. When you're going in your first year, you really don't even know necessarily what is coming around, and those conversations may not happen. So whatever is gonna, you know, provide the best insight when we need to make these decisions at budget time, I'm good with. I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. In that case, I'm going to ask, Kelly, can you remind me procedurally, when we're just renewing a policy or, you know, re-upping a policy, what our process is?
Yeah, if we want to do nothing, we can, but we have put it in front of the board if we want to revise the date on the bottom, because this policy goes back to 1999.
Yes.
In the previous series that we've done, we have put it forward, recommended as is to readopt and readopt the date on the bottom. So it would go to the board for that.
Okay. So I'm
It's
looking
not
for,
legally required. Sorry, Kate. I'm sorry. It's not legally required to do it that way, but we are trying to bring our policies. You know, this one is, as you can see, about 25 years since it's been last noted that we revised it.
Does this have to have a first review?
what will happen is what we would do is make a recommendation out of this committee for a first read by the whole board. That would give board members an opportunity to reflect and provide further information, because obviously we only have the committee members really weighing in here. But it would allow them to either approve the first read, and then it would be eligible for a second read and confirmation, or to kick the policy back to the committee level for further conversation. So given our conversation here at the committee this evening, I'm looking for a motion to make a recommendation for first read and adoption under a new date of the same existing policy.
So moved.
Thank you, Terry. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Al. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion so carries. Thank you. We have a third item on the agenda this evening, and that is a carryover from our last policy meeting around board member affiliations. I know that, you know, this kind of came up as a conversation at one point about whether board members should be required to disclose their affiliations with any organizations that they are a part of other than the Board of Ed. And that kind of falls under the policy committee, so I'm opening this up for conversation amongst committee members to get some feedback about their thoughts. Michelle?
Yeah, I wasn't aware that it had been brought up. Why, do we know why this is being brought up now? Is there a reason if it hasn't
was-
been in the past? I guess
it
I'm
was-
not up to date with that part of it. Thank you.
Sure, it was part of the September meeting originally, and I, we just never we had a very long meeting in September. We had a lot of conversation about the policies that were on there, so we didn't get around to having this conversation. But I do know that it was brought forward that there was some concern about whether or not board members were parts of different groups, if that would create a conflict with their position being a board member. And obviously there are a lot of different, most of us, I think, are affiliated with other groups or organizations outside of the Board of Ed. And from my perspective, I don't think we should have a requirement to disclose, but I do think we need to have, a conversation about why and when we should recuse ourselves from participating in either a board conversation, a board vote, or, our participation in another space because of our affiliation as board members. Teresa?
I think because this is an elected board, applying on those hand cards that we send out. So if there's an issue, I look at the palm cards. I mean, I don't really understand the problem there. I really don't.
Okay. I mean, we're having a conversation about it now because
Right.
it came forward, and I want to just make sure that we're, as the policy committee, it's our purview, so.
Okay.
Al?
I don't think there's an issue here. I think it's the same situation as if we become board members itself. There is no, that they're being elected to the position in itself. Okay, you can't work for the city of Danbury or the city Board of Education, right? The public schools. I mean, so I think in that sense, we're adults and educated adults that if we ever come to this situation, that we need to recuse ourselves. I mean, I don't think this is an issue. I really don't think it's an issue.
Thank you all. Any other comments from committee members? Michelle?
I agree with Al and Teresa in the sense that they are on the palm card, and obviously, if you should, if you feel that there is a conflict of interest, like you're hired or somebody works in the Board of Education, whatever, that makes sense to me. And you should, if you're working in the school and perhaps there might be some, if there's a direct payment from the Board of Education or something like that, something like that should be disclosed. As a Board of Ed member, you're volunteering, you're elected, and your public information is out there most likely. So I'm going to agree with Teresa and Alan. I think we're going to leave it to the board member. If there's a reason to recuse themselves, they should bring that to the board and the Board of Ed, and be an adult about it and say that. That's how I view it. I don't know if you have to disclose something like that.
Thank you for the feedback. I guess while we're having this conversation, I do want to give a couple specific examples, because I was thinking about this and thinking about the different circumstances. I know some of our board members are newer. From my perspective, if, for example, we're taking a vote on a contract and there's a member of the board who has a close relative, like a spouse or an adult child who's part of the contract group. We had that with Joe Da Silva, who's a former board member whose wife was the secretary for one of the schools. And so when it came to the vote by the board about the contract for the secretaries, Joe appropriately recused himself from the vote and explained why he was doing that. So that, you know, like Michelle, like you were saying, that's an example of a situation where, you know, you need to understand the conflict of interest it presents for you having personal gain in a particular situation. The other circumstance, which is something I bumped into, if you're offering testimony at a city meeting, board members doing that need to remember that the board chair is the person who speaks for the board and the only person who speaks for the board. So if you are a board member, you're still obviously entitled to speak at a city council meeting, but you have to speak as a private citizen. And given that, you know, as board members, we're recognizable in the public as such, it's important to explicitly state as you're giving your testimony that you're doing so as a private citizen and not as a member of the Board of Education. So, you know, the idea again is just that none of us are using our position on the board to either create a circumstance for personal gain, financial or otherwise, and that you should not be using your position on the board to unduly influence the opinion of other people in public spaces. And I think that those are pretty straightforward and you know, easy to understand concepts. But I just wanted to make sure that we had this conversation and that folks, you know, are comfortable, you know, with that question that came forward. So I certainly appreciate all the feedback we got this evening about that. I do want to also just acknowledge I received, and Michelle, did you have something? Sorry.
Again.
You're muted.
No, Kate, I'm sorry if I interrupted you. Yes, you gave the perfect example with Joe Da Silva when I first got on the board. And so, you know, that is exactly what I was expecting is if you feel that you have a conflict, and of course, say that you're a citizen, you know, a resident, if you want to speak. I know that there are times when Gladys has said, hey, I need you guys to come and support the board or even speak on behalf of the board, you know, as a board member when we're looking for the budget or to come and support and speak out. So again, I would assume that in that case, we are going as board members to support our chair. But if we're going to get up and speak, then we are going to be speaking as citizens, as a resident in front of the city council. You know, that's how I would look at it. So thank you very much. That was the perfect examples for me.
Thank you. I do want to just make folks aware, I did receive an email from one of our committee members requesting that we distribute information about the required policies from CABE and the recommended policies. Just so that folks are aware, in our June meeting, we had on the, and I don't believe we've seen it yet this year, but we certainly received that information at the June meeting. There's an audit file that was sent around by Kelly, which includes a breakdown of which policies are required and which ones are recommended. So just so you folks are aware, we do have that information. It's good for you to make sure that you're keeping us on our toes here as well. We aren't perfect and sometimes we make mistakes. So if you do see something that we've skipped or haven't handled, you know, we're going through these policies in order to try to make sure that we're methodical about it. And making sure that we're going through policies in a way that make sure we're going to hit every single one of them. Especially after that audit process with CABE, we want to make sure that we're taking care of each of these policies in order. The only exception to that, of course, is if we have something that comes through in a timely fashion, like this evening when we reviewed the charges for school meals. That's a policy that we had to make an adjustment because of an existing change to the way that we handle meals in the district. Similarly, you know, we may at some point visit the topic of policy around cell phones or AI, as those are also timely, and we're having conversations about those as board members and in the community. But for the most part, what we're trying to do is work through each of these series on the policies to make sure that we're keeping our policy book updated. Okay. All right. We've gone through the entire agenda. I thank you so much. That was a record for this committee today. And I'm looking for a motion to adjourn, please.
So
make it-
moved.
Second.
Teresa, we'll make the motion, and Al, you'll get the second. All
Yes.
those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye.